There was a time when the American Christmas didn't need Instagram filters or endless gift lists to feel magical. The lights twinkled imperfectly, the ornaments were kept in shoeboxes, and the recipes were scribbled on butter-stained cards. It was the smell of sugar caramelizing in the oven, the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen, and the clinking of silverware at the table that marked the start of the evening. Each dish told a story of patient grandmothers, hurried mothers, and children who couldn't wait to taste the first slice of pie. Today, we travel back in time to relive the flavors that defined Christmas from the 1950s to the 1980s, a feast of memories where every serving dish carried more than food. It carried love, time, and the taste of a world that seemed to turn a little slower. No dish represented the American Christmas better than the bake ham topped with pineapple rings and bright red cherries. It was the centerpiece of the table, gleaming, heavy, and wrapped in an aroma that blended brown sugar, cloves, and orange juice. The oven became a heart of the home, and laughter echoed as the glaze slowly caramelized, reflecting the colorful lights of the Christmas tree. In the 1960s, this dish was a symbol of status and hospitality. The glossier the ham, the more meticulous the hostess. It was the height of suburban aesthetics, when magazine recipes promised glamour and practicality in a single dish. But beyond the flawless appearance, there was something more: the ritual. The ceremonial slicing, the first piece served to the father, the salty flavor mingling with the sweetness of tropical fruit. It was America reinventing itself through colors and flavors, blending tradition and modernity. Today, it might seem kitschy or even over the top, but back then it was pure Christmas elegance, a perfect portrait of an era when even Christmas dinner reflected the American dream. Green bean casserole. In every American kitchen of the 1950s and 60s, there was one dish that seemed to be everywhere: the green bean casserole. Created in 1955 by Campbell's to promote its canned cream of mushroom soup, the dish became a national institution within a few years. Just 3 ingredients, green beans, cream, and fried onions, were enough to turn an ordinary dinner into a celebration. The oven released that unmistakable aroma, part vegetable, part industrial, yet full of comfort. It was the kind of food that brought generations together, and every spoonful came with laughter and family stories. What's curious is that, despite its simplicity, there was something deeply emotional about this dish. It represented an era when homemade began to blend with factory-made. It marked the beginning of the age of convenience, when the modern housewife could balance practicality with affection. Even those who never loved the taste of hot green beans remembered the sound of the spoon breaking through the golden crust, the clinking of plates, and the feeling that Christmas had at last begun. Green bean casserole wasn't just a side dish. It was the scent of childhood, preserved in the collective memory of a generation. Candied yams. Sweet potatoes covered with marshmallows were a spectacle in themselves, a dish that seemed to defy logic and, at the same time, define the American Christmas spirit. Emerging in the early 20th century, it became a true classic by the 1970s, when extravagance was an essential part of any festive table. The idea of topping a hot dish with a sugary cloud and browning it until it formed a crispy crust might have seemed absurd, but at Christmas, it made perfect sense. It was a bold mix of flavors and textures, sweetness melting into saltiness, butter blending with brown sugar and cinnamon, and the scent of nutmeg filling the house. The dish was loved and hated in equal measure, and perhaps that's exactly what made it unforgettable. It represented an America unafraid of excess, one that believed more sugar meant more joy. Each spoonful was a return to childhood, a reminder that Christmas wasn't about balance, but about generosity. Watching that golden layer bubble in the oven was almost a sacred ritual, and the first fork sinking into the hot sweetness marked the beginning of the most anticipated night of the year. Ambrosia salad. Few dishes capture the curious spirit of 1960s America as perfectly as ambrosia salad, an unlikely mix of canned fruit, shredded coconut, and mini marshmallows. It was a mandatory presence at holiday dinners and church potlucks, usually served in clear glass bowls that showed off its rainbow of textures. The name ambrosia, borrowed from the food of the Greek gods, seemed far too pretentious for something so simple, and perhaps that's exactly why the whole country fell in love with it. It was sweet, colorful, and refreshing, the kind of dessert that brought lightness to the heavy abundance of the Christmas dinner table. Ambrosia had something communal about it, a touch of improvisation that made it democratic. It didn't require culinary talent, just goodwill and a can of mixed fruit. It was the dessert of aunts, grandmothers, and neighbors who arrived holding a serving dish and wearing a smile. Serving ambrosia was like sharing a piece of childhood. Today, many turn up their noses at the sugary mix, but those who lived through those Christmases remember, well, the sound of the spoon sinking into the creamy layer and the cool sweetness that ended the night with a touch of innocence. Deviled eggs. Before the ham was carved and the casserole came out of the oven, there was always a tray of deviled eggs making its way around the room. They were the prelude to the feast, the appetizer that announced the start of the evening. Meticulously prepared, they came sliced in half, filled with a creamy mixture of yolk, mayonnaise, and mustard, finished with a sprinkle of paprika that added both color and pride. In the 1950s and 60s, deviled eggs were almost a national symbol of hospitality. No homemaker considered her table complete without them, and every family swore by their own secret seasoning that made theirs the best. What made this dish special wasn't just the taste, but the gesture. It represented the care of hostesses who balanced elegance and economy in a country undergoing transformation. Served on olive green plastic or pastel ceramic trays, the deviled eggs embody the aesthetic of a time when simplicity was synonymous with care. The flavor may have changed over the decades, but the memory remains alive. The clinking of cutlery, the conversations before dinner, and that little creamy egg that somehow carried the very spirit of the American Christmas. Stuffing with sausage and celery. The bread, sausage, and celery stuffing was the soul of the American Christmas, the kind of dish that filled the whole house with fragrance and seemed to embrace anyone who walked through the door. Every family had its own version, some drier and crispier, others moist and almost creamy, but all shared the same aroma of melted butter and autumn herbs. It was a dish that bridged luxury and comfort between the golden turkey's ritual and the warm familiarity of inherited recipes. The sound of bread toasting in the oven and sausage sizzling in the pan signaled that dinner was about to begin. This dish also told the story of a country reinventing itself with every generation. Stuffing was tradition, yet each decade left its mark, sometimes spicier, sometimes simpler, always reflecting the taste of its time. In every bite, there was a balance between abundance and memory, between what people had and what they dreamed of having. It was the flavor of home, of improvisation and generosity that united grandparents and grandchildren around something simple, yet made with soul. Cranberry sauce, homemade or canned. Among all Christmas dishes, few inspire as much affection and laughter as cranberry sauce. Bright red, glossy, and with that hypnotic wobble that made children stare at the dish for minutes, it was the colorful pause between the brown and golden tones of the table. In many homes, it came straight from the can, and no one saw a problem with that. You just opened it, let it slide out in one smooth motion, and sliced it into perfect rounds, still bearing the ridges of the tin. It was the portrait of modern convenience and, at the same time, a symbol of continuity. For others, the ritual demanded homemade preparation, fresh cranberries bursting in the pot, sugar slowly dissolving, and the tangy sweet aroma filling the air. In both versions, the role was the same, to balance the flavors of the feast and remind everyone that Christmas had room for both spontaneity and handmade care. Today, this sauce is remembered with a nostalgic smile, part joke, part tradition. Because somehow, that quivering ruby cylinder became an inseparable part of America's collective memory, proving that even the simplest things can carry entire decades of nostalgia. Jell-O mold desserts. If there was ever a dish that captured the colorful optimism of 1950s America, it was the molded gelatin dessert. It wasn't just a sweet treat, it was a visual spectacle. The molds came in the shapes of crowns, flowers, or stars, each promising a culinary work of art. Housewives took pride in their boldest combinations, layers of translucent colors alternating with suspended fruits, whipped cream, and even cottage cheese. It was the era of domestic modernity, when every dessert looked like it had come straight out of a black and white TV commercial. Behind that artificial shine, however, lay something deeper, the desire to show that the home could be creative, joyful, and above all modern. The Jell-O mold was proof that progress could taste like raspberry and have the texture of a dream. Serving it was like saying, here is the future, even if it wobbled a little on the plate. Decades later, these edible sculptures became nostalgic relics, remembered with a mix of laughter and tenderness. Because amidst so much change, it's comforting to know that, for a time, happiness could fit inside a gelatin mold. Fruitcake. The fruitcake is perhaps the most controversial item of any American Christmas. Dense, moist, and topped with candied fruits that gleamed like jewels, it was the gift everyone received, but few actually wanted to eat. Still, year after year, it returned to tables and to jokes with the same stubborn persistence. It became a symbol of tradition, endurance, and, in a way, collective humor. Each slice seemed to hold the weight of decades, of recipes passed down, of families who saw in fruitcake more than a dessert. They saw an inheritance. In the 1960s and 70s, it became almost a domestic legend. Many families would prepare it in advance, soaking it with rum or brandy for weeks until it reached the perfect balance between moisture and longevity. Some swore a fruitcake could last for generations, untouched. And perhaps that was its magic, the idea that something could endure so long in a world changing so fast. Today, it survives as a symbol of another time, when Christmas was more ceremonial and excess still carried a touch of charm. Sugar cookies with colored icing. Ending Christmas without the classic sugar cookies would be like putting up the tree without the star on top. Decorated with colorful icing and cut into the shapes of stars, bells, and reindeer, they were the finishing touch of the celebration, and perhaps the sweetest one. The preparation was almost a family ritual. Children scattered flour across the table, fighting over metal cutters, while the adults tried to keep order and the oven warm. The smell of butter, vanilla, and sugar filled the house, announcing that Christmas was complete. More than just a dessert, these cookies were bridges between generations. Each batch carried memories of past holidays and the promise that this moment, too, will be remembered in the future. Even when the icing was uneven or the colors ran together, no one cared. The charm was in the imperfection. In a time when everything seemed simpler, the joy was in doing it together, laughing at the mess, and eagerly waiting for that first bite. To this day, these cookies remain one of the most beloved traditions, perhaps because within them still lives the essence of what Christmas has always meant: togetherness, affection, and the irresistible taste of nostalgia. The American Christmas of decades past was more than just a date on the calendar. It was a state of mind. Recipes came from cooking magazines and supermarket labels, but what truly mattered was the care behind every dish. The gleam of icing, the steam rising from casseroles, the clinking of glasses, and the whole house wrapped in that unmistakable scent of butter and cinnamon. It was a time when love was measured in spoonfuls of sugar, and silence only arrived after the last bite. These dishes, now looked upon with humor and tenderness, carry more than flavor. They carry memory. Each one is a living portrait of an America that believed in simplicity, in gathering around the table, and in the joy of small things. Perhaps what we've forgotten isn't the recipes themselves, but the magic that once existed in cooking for those we love, in sharing the same dish, in feeling that the world could wait until tomorrow. And maybe by remembering these flavors, we might also rediscover what truly makes Christmas everlasting. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, which of these recipes makes you feel the most nostalgic?